Hi everyone, my name is Monique.
And I'm Naveen from Before You Play.
And today we're going to be discussing the newest title to be released by Stonemaier Games called Wyrmspan.
Yes, this game is designed by Connie Vogelmann, and like Monique said, this is coming to us from Stonemaier Games. And in this game, we are taking on the role of amateur dracologist, the study of dragons, and we're trying to entice these dragons to come to our caves so we can put them in play and score the most points.
Yes, this is a game for 1 to 5 players that is heavily inspired by a hugely popular game from Stonemaier Games called Wyrmspan. And that game was designed by Elizabeth Hargrave, who I believe played a strong role in the development of this title. And although this is a Wyrmspan game, as the title suggests, this game is not cross-compatible with Wyrmspan or any of its expansions because there are new mechanics in this game that make it different. And so it just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And so today we are going to start with an overview of how the game is played, especially for those of you who have never played Wyrmspan before, and then we'll go into our thoughts. So if you'd like to jump around, we'll include timestamps in the description below.
Now, before we begin, we do have to mention that this copy was sent to us as a review copy from Stonemaier Games, so just be aware of that. Lastly, if you like these kind of videos and you want to see more in the future, please consider subscribing.
All right, and without further ado, let's get started.
Sure.
So if you'd please direct your attention to the center of the table, we're all set up here for a 2-player game of Wyrmspan. Welcome to our dragon caves.
Welcome.
Now, like Naveen was mentioning, in this game, we are amateur dracologists. And so over the course of the game, our goal is to build out our 3 caves and lure or entice dragons into them. Now, the general concept here is each player has their own player mat that's divided into 3 different caves. We have the Crimson Cavern, the Golden Grotto, as well as the Amethyst Abyss. Now, in order to entice or build out these dragon cards onto our caves, they first need to be excavated. And so at the start of the game, the first space in each cave is actually excavated already. As for the rest of these spaces, you'll need to build out these cave cards onto the space first before you can play a dragon card.
So at the start of the game, each player is going to be given 3 cave cards as well as 3 dragon cards, and then amongst those 3, you get to choose any 4 to keep.
As well as any 3 resources of your choice. And so in this game, there are 4 main types of resources, and they are themed towards what dragons use, I guess.
Sure.
We have milk and meat, as well as crystals and gold. And of course, we also have eggs. And just like in Wyrmspan, the colors don't matter. These are all just general eggs. And so the game is played over the course of 4 rounds. And each round, players will be taking turns taking 1 action each until everyone passes, which is different from Wyrmspan. In Wyrmspan, everybody had action cubes that basically dictated how many actions players had each round. In this game, players have coins, which you'll need to pay to basically take any of the different types of actions, but the difference is you can always pass early, and there are other ways in which you can gain more coins in a round, giving you more actions. Or I guess potentially a variable number of actions as compared to your opponents. Now in this game, there are 3 different types of actions that you can take, and they're all printed on your player board, but again, on your turn, you're only taking 1. And so the first type of action is called Excavate. Excavating allows you to play additional cave cards into one of your caves. Now, the cave cards are all colored, different colors, but the colors don't matter. So
Similar to the eggs.
similar to the egg. So just because this is pink, I can still place it in the other types of caves. Now, whenever you take an action, the cost is printed on the action type. And so in order to excavate, you have to pay 1 of your coins. And when you take actions, you're going to actually place it on your player mat so that you can basically see which actions you've taken in the round. And so cave cards are played onto your player mat from left to right. And so the very first column here does not cost anything more other than the 1 coin that you paid to take the action. But playing to the other 2 columns will cost you a certain number of eggs, depending on the column. And eggs, just like in Wyrmspan, will always need to be paid from either any of the dragons on your play mat or from any of the 2 storage spaces that you have on the left side of your player mat. And so at the start of the game, each player starts with 1 egg. Now, the one last important detail about cave cards is when you play them, they will give you a certain benefit, and these are going to range quite a bit. This cave card specifically says, when played, I gain 1 meat and I get to lay an egg. Some cave cards will let you convert resources or gain additional dragon cards, and some will even allow you to play another cave card for free.
So there's a wide variety of these, but they are immediate and one-time bonuses.
And that's pretty much it for the excavate action. Now, the next type of action is called entice, and Enticing allows you to play a dragon card from your hand onto an excavated space on your player mat. Now, if you played Wyrmspan before, this is essentially the play a bird action.
It is.
And so in order to take this action, you have to pay a coin as a cost, just like the excavate action, as well as any printed costs that are on the dragon cards themselves. Now, each dragon card will tell you which specific cave you can actually place them into. As an example, my hushed oak wing fey dragon over here can only go into my crimson cavern, whereas the common blue griff dragon will only go into the amethyst abyss. Some dragon cards are a little bit more flexible than that. As you can see in the display here, these all can go into several, but it is similar to Wyrmspan in that sense. And at the top left-hand corner, it tells you the additional resources that you need to pay in order to put them into play. So this one requires me to spend 1 meat, whereas this one requires me to spend a gold as well as a crystal.
Sure.
They can also hold a certain number of eggs. In this case, they can each hold 3, and they also have a certain type of ability at the bottom and a personality trait. So this one is shy, whereas this one is helpful. The personality traits are actually important because you'll see certain scoring criteria look for these specific traits.
Yeah, and other cards may feed into them as well.
Right. Oh, and just like in Wyrmspan, they also have a specific size.
Right.
So this is a small dragon, this is a medium one, and at the end of each round, we're going to be scoring for certain round objectives. And so as you can see in the first round, small dragons on your player mat will score you a certain number of points depending on the player who had met that criteria the most.
Who has the most small dragons?
Yes. So then after paying its cost, dragons are placed onto your player mat from left to right over an empty cave space.
That's it.
Now, unlike in Wyrmspan, playing more dragons will not require you to spend eggs because you've already spent them when placing the cave cards onto your player mat, unless you place this type of dragon into play, which is a very special type called a hatchling. So hatchlings work a little bit differently. They don't hold eggs, unlike the other dragon types. They're still worth points, but in order to put them into play, you'll always have to spend 1 egg and between 1 and 3 milk. These are thematically
Babies.
baby dragons, yes,
ones.
and you have to feed them in order for them to grow up and be adult dragons. Now, the thing that makes hatchlings unique has to do with their special ability at the bottom, which is actually a part of the last type of action, which is called explore. Now, the explore action is actually 3 different actions because taking this action basically allows you to choose one of your 3 caves and explore them with your adventurer. Now, when taking this action, you have to first choose which of your 3 caves you're going to explore. And they each specialize in something different. So the Crimson Cavern will gain you resources, the Golden Grotto gains you dragon cards, and the Amethyst Abyss specifically gains you cave cards. So let's just say, for example, I'd like to explore my Crimson Cavern. If it is the first time I'm doing so this round, then it only costs me 1 of my action coins. If I do it again in the same round, then I'll also have to spend an egg. And if I do it a 3rd time, then I'll have to spend 2 eggs. So it can be quite expensive. Now, when exploring one of your caves, your adventure starts at base camp, and you're basically going to go from left to right in that specific cave, walking until you reach a spot that has this stop sign. So if I'm going to explore my Crimson Cavern, the first space here will gain me a resource of my choice. And so there's no bird feeder in this game. For anybody who's played Wyrmspan, you always have the option between all 4 of the resources available. Next, my adventure will actually stop at the dragon card. And so if I have a dragon card that has an effect that has this adventurer symbol, then I can resolve what it says. And so in this case, this allows me to lay 1 egg on any dragon in this column.
So it would have to be on that particular one because remember, hatchlings do not carry any eggs.
Right. So similar to Wyrmspan, you have to be able to hold eggs in order to lay them. Then my adventure would keep moving and I would get to resolve this benefit, but after resolving that, then that would end my action because there is no dragon card here. It is the first stop sign I see, which means that's it.
So just so you're aware, cave cards will never cover up these stop signs. Only the dragon cards do.
Right. And that is essentially how the explore action works in all 3 of the caves. The only difference is going to be in which dragons you've placed there, as well as the base bonus in all 3 caves. Now, the second mat bonus in all 3 caves is going to be the same. And so this symbol represents the Dragon Guild, which is a new concept that is specific to Wyrmspan. At the start of the game, each player's guild token starts on that start space. And basically, any time you resolve an effect that has this symbol, whether it's on your player mat or on some of the cards, I think, you get to advance on the board following the arrow. And then you gain the benefit of the space that you reach, where in that case, it's going to be an egg. The next time I advance, I'll gain a meat. And if ever I reach the bottom space or all the way back to the top, I get to place one of my tokens on an available space on the guild board. And so the game comes with 4 of these guilds. And so these effects are going to be different depending on which guild you're playing. So the Guild of Highlands here has spaces that'll allow you to, for example, gain an action coin as well as 2 cave cards. Or you can pay 1 action coin, then excavate up to 2 spaces for free with cave cards from your hand. Now, I just want to note that each of these spaces, only one person's token can go there, with the exception of this bottom space here that is unlimited. So if you just don't want to take any of these effects, you can just place a token here for end game points. Also with the exception that each player can only have at most 4 of their tokens on the guild board.
So this is definitely a brand new kind of element specifically for Wyrmspan. There's nothing like this in Wingspan. Being able to move along these paths at the right time will get you resources that are super valuable for you. But also getting yourself around this whole thing twice to get 4 markers out there is quite a challenge.
Yes, that's tough. But that's essentially how the dragon guilds work. Now, going back to the explore action, if I were to explore my golden grotto here, after taking a dragon card, I would then be able to activate my hatchling, which is something that I wanted to talk about earlier. So the strength of hatchlings are in their adventurer activation ability. Basically, every time you adventure onto a hatchling, you can do what it says. So my algal lindworm says I can cache a milk from my supply onto the card. So that is a Wingspan term. Caching resources basically lets you take something from your supply onto the card.
Now, that's not milk.
This is not milk.
Yes,
it has to be specifically milk for this card. But at the end of the game, any cached tokens are worth a point each. In addition, hatchlings also give you something back for whenever you do that thing. And so in this case, it says anytime you cache milk here, I gain a resource of my choice. And then when the 3rd milk is cached, I also gain 2 of these Dragon Guild bump up abilities.
So you gain the meat and a card.
That's right. And all the hatchlings work this way, by the way. They just all require different things and give you different rewards.
And in this game, you can convert at any time 2 resources into any one resource. So in Monique's case like that, she could have converted maybe these 2 into the milk she needed to cash it onto this. Unlike just in Wingspan where you're going to be doing that 2-to-1 for putting cards into play, you can actually do this conversion mid-turn.
At any time. Now the last thing about the player mat that I want to mention is how to lay eggs. So in Wingspan, 1 entire ability allows you to just lay eggs. That is not entirely present in this game.
It's not a thing at all.
You can adventure all the way to this space to lay 1 egg, which would require you to have cave cards and dragon cards in these 2 spaces. But other than that, you'll have to look for ways to gain eggs on dragon cards, cave cards, or just progressing up the Dragon Guild for 1 egg. So it's not as easy to come by, and you'll also have to spend eggs in order to take some actions. And if you're able to adventure all the way to the very end, by the way, these last spaces in each cave are pretty strong. The top one lets you cache up to 2 resources from your supply onto any dragons. This one lets you tuck up to 2 cards, which is another Wingspan mechanic, which allows you to literally tuck a card from your hand behind one that's already there, and those will score you 1 point each at the end of the game as well. And the bottom one here lets you discard up to 2 cave cards from your hand and lay 2 eggs for each. So they're a bit more powerful. Now, as soon as all players have passed, the round ends. And again, you do not have to use all of your action coins if you feel like it's beneficial to pass early. But at the end of each round, there is going to be a public objective. And these are going to change from game to game because the game comes with several of these. I already read this one, but some of them have to do with the dragon personality types. Like this one wants you to have shy dragons on your player mat. This one wants you to have a lot of nest egg spaces printed
capacity
on your cards.
Yeah.
And of course, at the end of the game, these will score you a certain number of points depending on where you ranked in each public objective. And also, at the end of each round, players' dragon cards that have once per round abilities will activate at that time. And so this is a new mechanic, I believe, specific to Wyrmspan. I think some of the Wingspan expansions may have these once per round abilities, but these ones are pretty abundant, I guess, in the deck. For example, this dragon here says up to 2 times you can pay a resource to lay an egg, and each opponent may do this once. And so that is actually something that you'll see a lot. There are powers that will give opponents abilities to gain things as well. And even though most things are optional in this game, those are not. So anytime you put something into play that gives your opponent something, those will always be required to activate. As for setup before the next round, players will always gain 6 more action tokens. So you'll always be able to take minimum 6 actions each round, as well as 1 egg. But that's essentially it. At the end of the 4th round, you'll gain points for your public objectives, all of the base points on your dragon cards, any dragon cards that have these flag abilities, because these are always endgame points. Oh, this one's bad. This one says lose 2 points for each other aggressive dragon in this cave. So this requires some planning.
It wants to be by itself.
That's right. But there you go. That is essentially how you play Wyrmspan.
I think you taught the whole thing.
I think you taught the whole game. So sorry, I can't help myself. So anyway, we are going to talk about the game now, but we do need to mention that for context, it's going to be really difficult for us to not compare this game to Wingspan while we talk about it.
Yeah.
It's pretty much impossible. So for anybody who's never played Wingspan before, just for context, we are both fans of that sort of design. And so both games have this commonality of some of the mechanics in terms of you're building out birds or dragons onto your player mat, and then you're activating them in an engine building sort of way. And we both really enjoy that aspect of both games. So this might be the most helpful part of our discussion for you, but feel free to watch the rest. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about it, shall we?
Sure. Yeah. So this shares a ton of similarities with Wingspan, and I think you and I are a little bit split on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're a little bit. Well, I think we agree on some things, and we definitely disagree on others.
Sure.
So let's just start with theme, because to me that is probably one of the more striking differences, right?
Yes.
Like Wingspan is about birds, and it's all about things that are factual, right, about these birds, and this is entirely fictional. But it also comes with a booklet, a separate booklet that has dragon facts.
Yeah.
So if you are sort of into that kind of lore, then you might resonate with one theme over another.
Yeah, so this one, I think the theme comes through a little bit more than Wingspan. Wingspan for me is just getting symbols and birds onto your board. This one, you're trying to build out your cave. You're trying to entice the different dragons that you want to study. And you're going to go explore and actually study them.
You don't think
and get
Wingspan
benefits.
is thematic?
I think Wingspan's bird watching. Bird
Yeah,
watching?
I think
Is that
it's
what you're
bird
doing?
watching. Aren't you?
Yeah.
Are you bird luring?
I don't know.
You also have to
in
feed
Wingspan,
them.
you're giving them food.
Yeah.
Are you giving?
They're laying
You're
eggs.
giving them food in Wingspan.
You're
Is that
also
what you're
placing them in their ideal habitat.
doing? Okay.
That's what.
Yeah, but that's like bird capturing. Like,
Okay,
that's
so
bird
it's
napping.
debatable
Yeah.
if either of these games are truly thematic.
This one,
but
you're actually enticing them. Like, hey,
Yeah.
you guys like gems and gold. You're like little goblins trying to get into my cave, get deep in there.
Okay.
So
anyway,
this one, the theme comes through a little bit more for me.
the whole point is I think some people will be more attracted to the bird theme and some people will be more attracted to the dragons.
Sure.
I don't think I'm necessarily attracted to either, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But I do think that this looks beautiful.
Very nice,
Everything
yeah.
looks really, really nice. The one thing that I was concerned about when we played this game the first time is how busy the board looked. But it was actually not a big issue because when you start playing the dragon cards to the player mats, all the dragon cards are mainly white.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really easy to distinguish them. But all the dragons are really cute. I think the artwork is really, really nice. It's very endearing.
Yeah, I think there's about I want to say there's like 180 unique dragon cards out there. So that's quite an undertaking for an artist to come up with that much. Plus, there's unique designs on the cave cards.
Yes.
Obviously, the tokens, the player mats. So a lot of work goes into doing something like that.
Now, the thing that we are truly split on is our opinions as to how similar this game is to Wingspan. Naveen believes that it is more similar
Much more similar
than I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I do agree. I don't think that you can really argue. It's called a Wingspan game.
Sure.
Like, there is a base under here that is very Wingspan, right? You have your player mats. You are collecting resources or food in order to play birds or dragons onto your player mat. And then they all have different effects that you're trying to trigger into an engine building sort of way, I guess.
That you can foresee the 4 end of round scoring,
Yes.
which is very similar to Wingspan.
Also very similar.
They also also have wingspans, like in Wingspan, versus size here.
Yes, the
They have
layout of the dragon
layout,
cards
yeah.
themselves are very similar to the birds, with the exception of the personalities and the hatchlings.
They can hold eggs.
Yes.
They can go to one of 3 rows. So that, in that sense, like for me, it's very, very similar to Wingspan.
Right, but there are some striking mechanical differences that for me make the game feel different. I feel this game is harder. It really is.
In our
It's
plays, it was
tighter.
definitely tighter. Yeah.
Yes. So I won't argue about that with you. I definitely agree that the basis of this game is Wingspan. But some of the mechanics, such as just the way that the player mat has been retooled, make the game feel a lot tighter. The very first time we played this game, it was actually really difficult for me to rewire my brain into figuring out how or what this game wanted me to do. Because when you play Wingspan, you know, you can always count on the top row to give you resources. All I need to do is play 2 bird cards on that top row, and now I can always count on those 2 resources, or two or three
2 or 3, yeah.
food resources if I just discard a card from my hand. Granted, it is also up to the roll of the dice that are in the bird feeder, which is your enemy.
Yeah, sometimes. Oh man, the first couple times I played Wingspan specifically, I was just constantly chasing my tail. I would I don't have the cards that match what's in the bird feeder, so why am I gonna try to put this out there?
Right.
And I was in this locked mechanism where it's I can never get ahead, and everybody else had the things needed, and then I'm kind of waiting for people to clear out the bird feeder so that I can make it favorable for me.
So that is potentially an issue in Wingspan that this completely removes, because anytime you need to gain resources, you always have a choice between whichever one you want / need, and that's really helpful. But the way that the player board is structured is you have to adventure in order to take that action. The explore action is basically the same as you tapping a row on your Wingspan mat.
It's running your engine.
The difference is you can only get at most 2 resources for this top mat, whereas you can easily get 3 earlier on in Wingspan. The other reason why it's easier to do that is because in Wingspan, you don't have to build out cave cards. So in order for me to get my adventurer to be able to access this spot here, I would have had to build a cave card and 2 dragons. So that takes more actions. You only have 6 actions in the first round, right?
More actions, more resources.
Yeah. Now, if you've never played Wingspan before and you're curious about what I'm talking about, this is the Wingspan player mat. And anytime you need to gain food, you take the action. This row, you tap this row that lets you gain food. If you have 1 bird card here already, then you gain 1 food, but you can alternatively discard a card from your hand to gain another. So right off the bat, after playing just 1 bird card, you're potentially gaining 2 food already. Whereas this player mat, it's a lot harder to do that.
And food, again, that's basically what you're paying to put your birds into play. In Wingspan, here it's resources, but you get your choice, not just what's kind of left over in the bird feeder when it's your turn.
Right. And the same holds true, by the way, for drawing additional dragon cards or cave cards. It's harder to do, but for me, that wasn't the important part. The important part was the ability to gain resources, because these dragon cards are going to require a wide variety of resources, and they're expensive.
They are very expensive, yeah.
So right off the bat, when we first started playing this game, I was thinking, gosh, how do you even put these dragons into play? In addition, if I want to be able to adventure on this space again, I now have to pay an egg. So it does remove the issue in Wingspan that people typically talk about, where you can spam the egg row.
Yeah, because it's a whole action, basically. So if you build out that middle row in Wingspan, and you can get 3 to 4 eggs on a particular turn, and you're like, well, it's going to take so long to put that bird card into play.
Yeah.
Like, let's say you got to this ability right here. It's like, well, I could put a bird card into play. I'd have to get the resources to put that bird card into play. That's multiple turns. Or I can just get 3 points by just taking this egg action right here.
Yes, for anybody who's not played Wingspan, by the end of the game, a lot of people will have built out this row, and you'll pretty much just take this action over and over again to get 4 points per action.
Exactly, yeah.
You pretty much cannot do that.
You can't do that
in
in this
Wyrmspan
game,
because they've eliminated the lay eggs action. And so in order to lay an egg, you have to get all the way here to lay 1 egg. And so what the game actually forces you to do is it forces you to find these resources and these egg mechanics, I guess, in other ways. And so that's going to be a combination of finding the cave card that'll get you these things, or finding the specific dragon cards that will gain you the benefits that you need.
Moving on the Dragon Guild.
Moving on the Dragon Guild when the time is right. And so that's the part of the game that makes it significantly more difficult for me, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, it's definitely another ramp up kind of game. Like the first round, in all of our plays, it's been like, man, like I have these cards and I only have one resource. I really don't want to explore for just one resource. If I want to do it again, it's going to cost me my one valuable egg that I got here. Eventually, I'm going to need eggs to build out more cave cards. So you definitely feel that kind of locking.
You feel the constriction.
It was about halfway through the third round when your engine's actually kind of built out, and now you're actually exploring and taking multiple actions on your board, where kind of that spark kind of ignites in the game, because at the very beginning it's very wide open, but it's also very restrictive at the same time.
Right. And so Wyrmspan for me is a lot more open. It's a lot more straightforward in terms of you have these birds, those are the food items available. You can get those food things and then play your bird onto your mat and you can start basically running your engine. In this game, it requires a lot more planning, and I think that's what the major difference is going to be. Now, another major difference is in Wyrmspan, everybody had a certain number of player tokens that basically tells you how many actions you get per round, and each round you have fewer and fewer actions because those tokens get placed onto the public objective spots. In this game, you have action coins, and I think I like that.
You're guaranteed at least, 6 times 24 actions.
Yes.
But you can gain more, but you can also spend them because some of the dragons, some of the cost to actually put them into play, they're a really powerful dragon, might cost one of your whole actions.
That's right. Some of them do require you to spend these, and some of them also give you more. And so there is a bit of a luck aspect when it comes to the cards, because like I was mentioning earlier, you have to sort of find these opportunities for yourself, which does require you to do more digging through the deck. And that was something that I struggled with a little bit when I first started playing Wyrmspan, or just any games that sort of require you to find things with cards.
Card-based games, yeah.
Card-based games, and this game is no exception to that. And the other thing I like about the coin action mechanism specifically is the fact that you can hold these from round to round. So if at the end of the round I don't really see a useful action that I can take because maybe everything's too expensive or I don't like what I see in the market refreshes in between rounds. So I can hold my coin back to be able to take more actions in the next round.
Yeah, the market refresh is similar to Wyrmspan, but you cannot hold actions over from round to round.
Yeah.
Another thing is if maybe you are completely out of eggs at the beginning of the round, you're at least given one. So you're just basically putting that action onto the very next round. So I do appreciate that. I think you in our plays have used that ability a little bit more than me. I think for me, it's just like, just take the actions when I can. But I could see that like being a thing that you can utilize in plays when the situation is calling for it.
Yeah, it's more flexible. As for the dragon cards and the cave cards, these are going to be another one of the major new additions to this game. I honestly don't quite know how I feel about them
That's
just yet.
so funny that you say that.
Why?
Because I actually like the mechanism of building out the cave to set up putting the dragon into play.
Well, my first impression when I played the game for the first time is, it makes it messier, right? Because now you have two cards in one space.
And if you have to tuck a card under it, then it gets a little bit,
then it gets even messier. But the thing about the cave cards is they can be pretty powerful when the time is right. And that's the part that drives me crazy. So this one, it gains you a meat and you get to lay an egg. But what if you really needed it and it was there for me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they can be really powerful when the time is right. But the thing that I do like about them is it does limit the amount of dragons that you can just play onto your mat.
Yeah.
Which for me is another element of the game that does make it a little bit more restrictive. It adds to the puzzle that you're trying to solve.
It's a multi-step process to get a dragon into play. Yeah.
It does require you to manage two different hands of cards now, though.
It does, yeah.
But that's pretty much the extent of the cave cards, really. As for the dragon cards, I do like that they only have four main types of effects. You have the immediate effect. You now have endgame scoring cards, and I think that's what I like the most about them. And the fact that some of them have to do with the personality types, although it's still the same sort of luck-based factor.
Sure, yeah.
Where, if Naveen draws the card that is really ideal for him and he's able to find the endgame scoring cards and I'm not, then it's a lot more beneficial for him. But I will say the one thing I was not a big fan of are the hatchlings. So the hatchlings, I don't know how you feel about them, Naveen, but the hatchlings are supposed to be a really powerful aspect of Wyrmspan because every time you adventure, or basically any time you do the thing that it says, it gains you something. And if it's the third time you're able to do it, then it gains you something else that's even stronger.
Even better, yeah.
But the issue for me was all of the hatchlings that I was able to put into play, I was never able to feed because it's hard to get resources.
It's so hard to get resources. Yeah, so like this hatchling that you're showing, just to get this hatchling into play, it's going to cost you one of your very valuable eggs. Again, you cannot just take an action that gets you eggs. And 3 milk. So that is very expensive to get this into play. And like we said at the very beginning of the game, if you can only get 1, maybe 2 resources, every time, that's going to take you quite some time to get to milk. Now, obviously, you can do the 2 to 1. But man, just getting to that 3 milk was, I could just never see myself putting something like this into play.
Yeah, and the hatchlings don't hold eggs.
They don't hold eggs also, yeah.
And the thing about it is whenever you gain resources, at least for me, I'm sort of deciding, do I use a resource to actually put a dragon into play, or do I withhold them for the hatchlings? I just never felt like I wanted to put a lot of them into play, if that makes sense.
I found myself using them to tuck. If I was to top deck and it was a hatchling, I could not justify putting them into play.
Otherwise, the last major addition to this game is going to be the Dragon Guild Board. And I think that is one of my favorite aspects.
Same.
The ability to go around and get the resource that you need or plan for that resource when the time is right. You can see what's coming up next.
Yeah.
So you can kind of time when that's going to be advantageous for you. But the fact that these are also different, there are 4 of them in the game, and they all give you different benefits. And being able to time when you can place a token on there to be able to do a powerful thing, I think is neat.
Yeah, it's nice being able to go around here. It's like, I'm 1 meter away. Well, if I run my engine, then if I run my engine, I can get to this section here. Then perfect. I'll get the meat. That meat is the last element I need to get this card into play, this dragon card. And now that's going to make that part of my engine better. So it's about like round 3 where your engine and like kind of the true fun aspect of being able to run it and try to be clever in the different aspects of managing kind of your resources and which dragons you're going to get into play kind of really unfold. And using the guild board, there's something satisfying about using the guild board to get the thing that you need.
And it being the perfect time.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly, yeah.
But otherwise, I think those are the major differences that have made the biggest impact, at least on my playing experience.
Now, in terms of player count, so this one, like most Stonemaier games, plays up to 5. We have played it no more than 3 players.
No more than 3.
Because that's the way we typically like to play Wyrmspan. I think I tolerate it at 4, but I prefer it at 3 and 2.
Okay.
Because it can take some time before you're like I'm just gonna get 2 resources or something, or I'm gonna lay eggs and you're waiting for 4 other people to go. In this particular case, though, I think at higher player counts with those passive abilities, like when a player maybe puts a cave card into play and you get something out of it, probably a little bit better compared to Wyrmspan at higher player counts.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think it is a bit more advantageous in higher than 2 players, just because there are a lot of opportunities for you to put things into play that benefit other players. And like I was mentioning earlier, over and over again, resources are hard to come by. So that is a really good way for you to be able to gain something that you need.
Yeah, maybe like you get a passive egg because somebody put something into play, or you get a passive resource. There was definitely times in our games where it's like, I guess I'm gonna have to take that adventuring action to get the one resource that I need, and then it's when Monique's like, you get an action or you get a resource. It's like, oh my gosh, thank you. I really needed that.
Because you have to pay an egg.
You have to pay an
every
egg,
time you re-explore.
Yeah. So yeah, for us, I still like it at 2 players. I think 3 players was better because you just have a little bit more of that feeding in.
Of that flexibility.
So there you go. Like we were mentioning earlier, we were both kind of split on this game. I find that it is more similar to Wyrmspan than I anticipated or expected, and you feel differently.
I acknowledge that this game does feel similar, but I also welcome the changes that it brings.
Sure.
There's a lot of frustration that I've experienced personally with other people around the table when it comes to certain aspects of Wyrmspan that it just does not exist in this game anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of the spamming in any way, shape, or form doesn't really exist here. And it's just a different puzzle, in my opinion.
I do appreciate in this game the egg management as another type of resource that you're actually using, not only to build out your cave so that you can play more dragons, but also so that you can actually run your engine, because that is the thing. So in Wyrmspan, I would definitely find myself in like the last 2 or 3 turns being like, well, I can do all these things to try to get some points with these cards, or I can just do the simple action of just taking eggs.
Yes, that's
So
not here.
that is not possible here, which I do
Yes.
welcome.
So between the two, which game to try, that's going to be entirely subjective. You know,
Totally,
they're completely different themes, and they're also a bit different in terms of playing style. But in any case, we hope the video was helpful. If you have any questions about anything that you saw here today, please feel free to leave us a comment down below, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Otherwise, thank you all so much for watching our video. We really hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoy content like this and would like to see more in the future, please consider subscribing. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.